So recently I've been tasked by one of my scholar programs to make a project about positionality. I put it off for a while, but considering those people sort of help pay my tuition, I'd better get on that. So what is positionality exactly? Well, positionality is defined as how social context shapes your identity as well as the privilege you have access to. It's different for each country, considering that each country has different majorities and minorities to them. Today, we'll be analyzing my positionality and how it affects my life where I live, and go on to continue answering how it disrupts living for many people not only in this country, but all over the world. So to discuss where I live in the good old US of A, land of the free and home of the Big Mac. Specifically, I live in Maryland, a beautiful state with expansive forests, crabs lining the bay, and of course, that delectable low bay, ambrosia of the gods. Like, that isn't even a joke. If I have seafood, you bet your behind that stuff's going on it somewhere. Anyway, as part of the US, Maryland aligns typically with the rest of the country in terms of different identities and whether or not they're a minority or not. The main difference being that African Americans number around 30% here, rather than the 12% across the whole country. Speaking of race, whenever somebody thinks of differences between people, race is probably one of the first things that comes to mind. It's not hard to see why, since it's probably one of the most open identities that anyone has, considering it's all over your body. As for my race, I myself am Caucasian, the majority of the US. Fun fact, I actually did one of those Ancestry DNA things since my mom wanted 3 of them for Mother's Day, and there is literally only European in there. So gender has probably become one of, if not the most complex of the identities in the past few decades. I remember when I was growing up, there were really only 2 genders, male and female. However, as I became older, it slowly began to become a spectrum. Now, this isn't me complaining about all these new options, as I'm very proud of how many ways people can express their gender. Moving on, if you take a look at the gender spectrum, you begin to make some startling discoveries as to how the tier system works. You see, up here, you have the cisgender male, aka someone who was born male and still considers himself as a male. Below that, you have the cisgender female, who despite being pretty much the other half of all cisgenders, has experienced constant trivialization throughout history and still does not receive as well of treatment as males in certain aspects of life, such as the pay gap. Then at the very bottom, you sadly have the other genders. These genders often have a hard time just being allowed to exist in certain parts of the country. While I do identify as a cisgender male, I have a lot of friends all over the spectrum, and it hurts seeing how they have to suffer through something so foolish because we can't just live in a world where we can let people be happy even if we're not a part of it.
Haha, he says sex.
Sexuality is, of course, a preference in the people we find attractive. Like gender, it started out as a few branches and slowly expanded into a massive spectrum. A spectrum probably just as, if not more complicated than gender. Again, like gender, I support all of these different kinds. In any case, I consider myself to be bisexual, that is, attracted to one or more genders. Yep, that's right. My pool is far more expansive, and yet I still don't have a partner. While I'm technically in the minority, this one's a bit less prominent than the others discussed before. Considering that I don't wear any identifiers since it's not really my thing, I can feel comfortable walking down the street without getting stares unlike a lot of other unfortunate people. Okay, now class is an interesting one. Unlike the other identities so far that are based around majorities and minorities, class involves just one thing: money. Doesn't matter if you're part of the 1% here, technically a minority. As you can see from my highly analyzed and peer-reviewed chart, an increase in wage correlates with a significant increase with privilege. More money means more opportunity. Simple as that. I myself currently come from a middle-class family. However, there was one point in time where my dad was laid off and we were in a bit of a lower class. Despite that, I know people that are far worse off. And it's unfortunate that not all people are equal because of paper and fictional ideas. Oh, religion. You are one of, if not the most controversial of all these categories. In all seriousness, religion is an important expression of belief that concerns spiritual teachings. While it's been used to create large communities of friendly individuals, an aspect I very much admire, it's also been used to justify some not as friendly things. As for me, I grew up Catholic, which I've learned recently isn't apparently the majority. Apparently it's Protestant. Maybe they have better bread and wine over there, I don't know. As I grew up, however, I did eventually become atheist, which, although is a minority, has been increasing in popularity. Moreover, whereas other religions require you to do something that makes it more noticeable, atheists are that type that really doesn't have anything to identify themselves, except maybe being first in line at Cracker Barrel on Sunday. Despite my beliefs, I still respect religion for the good it does. It's more the people that misinterpret their readings that cause the issue and which need to be addressed. Disabilities, whether they be physical or mental, inhibit certain aspects of people's lives, whether it be the lack of an ability to walk or a genetic disorder that slows learning down. Some of these can be from birth, while others can develop during life, whether it be internal or some accident. Sadly, a lot of these people don't have the necessary help or the care from family, friends, and/or professionals they so desperately need. Growing up, I never really had any disabilities other than a way of talking that required speech therapy. There was a time when my school was concerned that I was somewhere on the autism spectrum and sent me for testing, but I came back with an ordinary profile. While there are plenty of other identities I could talk about, such as citizenship, language, and others, this video is already reaching the time limit. So looking at all of my identities, if we plug it into the positionality spectrum, we get a fairly obvious conclusion of pretty freaking privileged. If I were to remain stagnated in my lens, I most likely wouldn't be able to see the troubles of others, and the majority in almost every identity, and the few that I am a minority in aren't really as apparent as the others. When people realize their position on the positionality spectrum, some may deny it to continue living a comfortable life, or feel some sort of pity for themselves. So, is that it? Are we just meant to feel some sort of self-pity or inferiority to ourselves because of the way we were born and what we've required throughout life? Heck no, that's dumb! If all you ever do is feel sorry for yourself, whether you're on the highest or lowest rungs of positionality, then nothing will ever get done. Every person, no matter how they were born, deserves to be proud of the person they are, and after that, we can take steps to help each other. If you're a white person, stand by racial minorities if you see conflict. If you're cis and straight, help support others that wish to explore that spectrum so they may do so without fear. And if you're wealthier, maybe you can use your $44 billion to actually do something useful instead of buying a whole social media platform. God damn it, Elon! In conclusion, while change is slow and will take a lot of time, we can at the very least help support each other as it happens. A lot of people recommend not seeing the identities of others, such as being colorblind to race, but I find that not true. It's the beauty of these identities that make us who we are, and as such, we should work to explore that of others and see how beautiful their lives are as well as our own. Identity isn't a problem. It's a solution.